The vast expanse of space shimmered with the quiet hum of the Shkarn Empire's patrol fleet. For centuries, these advanced alien conquerors had ruled this region of the galaxy, keeping a tight grip on the sectors they controlled. Their ships, sleek and imposing, glided like shadows in the blackness, their presence an unmistakable symbol of power. The Shkarn were not just conquerors, they were the epitome of technological and military supremacy. None dared to challenge them, and their domain was protected by an impenetrable network of defenses, constantly monitored by their fleet. But on that fateful day, something unexpected happened. A low hum broke through the routine frequencies on the Shkarn fleet's command station. It wasn't the usual communications traffic from their soldiers or ships. It was a strange, out-of-place signal. One of the fleet's advanced sensor stations picked up an anomaly near the restricted space, the most sensitive and dangerous area in their sector. The area was infamous, forbidden to any ship, whether friend or foe. No one had dared to approach it in decades. But there, in the stillness of deep space, a ship was moving. The Shkarn officers gathered quickly, their eyes fixed on the blinking red dots on their screens. The signal was faint but unmistakable, a human-made craft. Captain Therak, the seasoned and ruthless commander of the Shkarn fleet, strode into the control room. His sharp features were illuminated by the glow of the holographic map as he studied the readings with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. "Is this correct?" he demanded, his voice a low growl. "Yes, Captain," one of the officers replied, clearly nervous. "The ship's design matches human technology, but it's unregistered. It shouldn't be here." Therak's brow furrowed. The Shkarn had encountered many species over the millennia, and none had ever dared to breach their most secure spaces. Humans were a young and relatively unremarkable race compared to the ancient Shkarn, but they had been making a name for themselves lately, engaging in skirmishes on the fringes of Shkarn territory. Still, the idea of one human ship slipping past their defenses was unthinkable. They had never posed a serious threat, until now. "Set intercept course," Therak ordered. "We'll see how they respond to a warning shot." The fleet's massive warships pivoted into formation, aligning to cut off the human vessel's path. There was no way this was a mistake. A human ship did not wander into restricted space without purpose. Therak's instincts screamed that there was something more here, something he couldn't yet see. "Prepare to engage," Therak commanded, turning on his heel. He gave the order for a warning shot. A single blast fired across the human vessel's path to send the message loud and clear: "Turn back or face destruction." The Shkarn ships powered their weapons. Energy pulses began to form at their tips, ready to launch a warning salvo. However, as they prepared to fire, something remarkable happened. The human ship didn't alter course. It didn't flinch. Instead, it continued moving forward, closing the distance between them with eerie calm. "What is this? Are they insane?" Therak muttered under his breath. "Fire the shot." A beam of concentrated energy lanced out from the Lid Shkarn ship. The blast should have incinerated any vessel that dared to challenge them. But instead of the human ship disintegrating in the beam's path, something strange occurred. A flicker of energy surrounded the human vessel. The beam hit, but instead of piercing its hull, it was deflected harmlessly into the vacuum of space. Stunned silence filled the room. The officers stared in disbelief. "That is impossible," one officer whispered. Therak's sharp gaze never left the screen. He narrowed his eyes, now fully alert. "Target their engines. Fire again." The fleet prepared another round of blasts. But this time, the human ship moved with an agility that defied logic. It twisted and turned with impossible speed, dodging the blasts with a precision that no human-made craft should be capable of. The Shkarn ships, built for war and battle hardened by centuries of conflict, found themselves struggling to land a single hit on the human ship. This wasn't just a simple breach. This human ship, this indomitable, was not acting like a typical human vessel. It was as if the ship itself knew how to anticipate every move, evading them with unnatural grace. A cold sense of dread began to creep into Therek's mind. He had dealt with countless species before, each predictable in their fear or defiance. But this was different. "Send the message," Therek ordered grimly. "Inform them that they are in violation of restricted space. They have one chance to turn back. If they refuse, we will destroy them." The officers worked quickly, transmitting the warning across the human ship's communication channels. Therek's mind raced, his military instincts urging him to take decisive action. But he couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. A new and unpredictable force had entered their domain, and he couldn't afford to underestimate it. As the warning message blared through the comms, Captain Alina Drake, aboard the Indomitable, remained unfazed. She knew exactly what was at stake, and she wasn't turning back. The stage was set for a confrontation unlike anything the Skarn had ever encountered. Captain Alina Drake stood at the helm of the Indomitable, her hand steady on the controls as she gazed out the viewport at the advancing Skarn fleet. The message from the Skarn had been clear: turn around or face obliteration. But Alina had already made up her mind. There would be no turning back. The Indomitable was no ordinary ship. It was the culmination of humanity's most advanced technology, built with one purpose in mind: to deliver a warning to the most dangerous and powerful forces in the galaxy. The Skarn were not just another adversary. They were a force that had ruled this sector for centuries, with no equal. But the human race, despite its relative youth in the cosmos, had something the Skarn lacked: the will to survive. Alina's crew was silent behind her, the tension palpable in the bridge. Every officer knew the gravity of their mission. They had come here not to fight, but to prevent an even greater threat, one that had already destroyed entire civilizations. The Zorvok were coming, and if this Skarn refused to listen, all of their efforts would have been in vain. The lives of countless species depended on their success, but first they had to get past the Skarn. "Captain, they've transmitted a warning," Lieutenant Simmons said, his voice tight. "They're preparing to fire." Alina nodded, her expression calm, betraying none of the nerves she might have felt. She had led her crew through worse. "We've been through worse," she said simply, her voice steady. "Activate the shields. Prepare the main guns, but do not fire unless ordered." The Indomitable was equipped with advanced shielding that far outclassed anything the Skarn had encountered. It was one of the secrets they had kept from the galaxy, until now. The ship's weaponry was just as powerful, able to take down a fleet if need be. But Alina was not here to fight. At least, not yet. She had no intention of starting a war with the Skarn. All she wanted was to make sure they understood what was coming. "Shields online," Lieutenant Simmons reported, as the ship's energy field enveloped the hull in a soft, blue glow. "We're ready, Captain." Alina glanced at the sensor readings. The Skarn were closing in fast. "Hold steady," she ordered. "Let's see if they can't see reason." The first salvo from the Skarn hit just moments later, an intense burst of energy that illuminated the dark expanse of space. But Alina had anticipated this. The Indomitable was quick, almost too quick for the Skarn to track. The ship moved in a series of erratic, unpredictable trajectories, darting and weaving through the incoming fire. Each blast from the Skarn fleet seemed to miss by mere centimeters. "Impressive," murmured Commander Matthews, the Indomitable's second in command. "They're not giving us an inch." "Let them try," Alina replied coolly. "We've got all the time we need." Despite the barrage, the human ship's shields held firm, absorbing the energy with almost no effect. It was as if the Skarn were firing at a shadow, their weapons ineffective against the advanced human technology. Alina knew they had no choice but to escalate things. The Indomitable wasn't just a battleship. It was a statement, a symbol of human ingenuity and perseverance. If this Skarn didn't understand that now, they soon would. "Signal to this Skarn," Alina said. "Tell them we are not here to fight. We have a message they need to hear. We'll give them one chance to listen." She turned toward the communication officer, her gaze unwavering. The officer, his fingers flying over the console, transmitted the message. "Sending now, Captain." The message was clear and firm. "This is Captain Elena Drake of the human vessel Indomitable. You are currently in violation of restricted space. We are not here to fight, but we cannot turn back. There is a threat to all of us. A threat that will destroy your empire and ours if we don't act together. We must speak. Now." Elena paused for a moment, watching the Skarn fleet as they circled. They were massive, their ships bristling with weaponry. She could feel the weight of the decision pressing on her. She knew the risks, and she knew that these Skarn might never agree to an alliance. But there was no other choice. If she failed here, the galaxy would fall. The minutes stretched into what felt like hours as the Indomitable and the Skarn ships hovered in the vast emptiness of space, a deadly standoff. Elena stood tall, her resolve unbroken. Her crew trusted her, and she trusted them. This mission wasn't about winning a battle. It was about preventing the destruction of everything humanity had worked for. As the final Skarn ship moved into position, Elena's thoughts were clear. The war for the future of the galaxy had already begun. All that remained was whether the Skarn would see reason, or whether they would be wiped out by their own arrogance. The silence on the bridge of the Indomitable was deafening, broken only by the occasional hum of the ship's systems. Elena stood resolute as the Skarn fleet closed in around them, their ships forming a perfect circle, trapping the human vessel in their midst. There was no turning back now. The stakes were too high. The Zorvok were on their way, and if the Skarn didn't listen, humanity's last hope for survival would be dashed. The seconds dragged on as the Indomitable waited, its crew holding their breath. Then, as if on cue, the Skarn responded. Their message came through loud and clear. "This is your final warning, human vessel. You will turn around immediately or face destruction." Elena's fingers tightened around the armrest of her chair. She had expected the threat, but the finality in their words still stung. The Skarn were known for their arrogance, but this was something else. She exchanged a glance with Commander Matthews, who met her eyes with a somber nod. There was no choice but to stand their ground. They had come too far to turn back. "Prepare the ion shields," Elena ordered. "Brace for impact. We won't give them an inch." The officers around her moved with practiced efficiency. The shields on the Indomitable hummed to life, their protective energy barrier enveloping the ship. The Skarn were about to fire. She could feel it in the air, the tension crackling like static. Without warning, the Skarn fleet unleashed a salvo of energy blasts. Brilliant beams of light streaked across the dark void of space, a wave of destructive force aimed directly at the Indomitable. Elena didn't flinch. Instead, she gripped the controls, guiding the ship with precise movements. The Indomitable surged forward, twisting and darting in a way that defied logic. It wasn't just the speed that made the human ship evasive. It was the unpredictable nature of its maneuvers. To the Skarn, it must have seemed as though the ship was everywhere and nowhere at once. The first few blasts missed, passing by the Indomitable like shooting stars. The crew could feel the rumble of the energy discharges, but nothing hit home. Elena didn't speak. She didn't need to. Every motion of the ship, every calculation, was instinctual, a seamless blend of technology and human intuition. Then, without warning, one of the Skarn warships fired a direct shot, a massive energy beam aimed directly at the Indomitable's engines. The blast was powerful enough to obliterate most ships in an instant, but Elena was ready. With a fluid motion, she jerked the ship hard to the left, sending it into a sharp, evasive maneuver. The beam missed by mere inches, slicing through space with a violent roar. The crew gasped collectively. They had all seen simulations of such tactics, but nothing prepared them for the sheer reality of dodging Skarn fire at full speed. "Status report," Elena barked, her voice calm but firm. "Shields holding at 96%, Captain," Lieutenant Simmons replied, his eyes glued to his console. We're sustaining minor hull damage, but nothing critical. Alina's heart raced, but her face remained stoic. She had expected this. She knew this Skarn wouldn't back down easily. But what they didn't realize was that this wasn't just a battle of weapons. It was a battle of wills. And humanity had something the Skarn couldn't predict: adaptability. Another volley of shots came, and again, Alina wove the indomitable in a series of tight, unpredictable patterns. The ship danced between the Skarn blasts, leaving behind a trail of empty space where the alien weapons had missed. "Impressive," muttered Commander Matthews under his breath. He couldn't help but admire the grace with which Alina handled the ship. There was a certain artistry to it, something that no cold, calculated strategy could ever replicate. The Skarn fleet, for all its strength, was now faced with something they had never encountered before: a human mind that could think and act faster than their machines could compute. But the Skarn were not easily deterred. With their vast superiority in numbers, they'd regrouped quickly and adjusted their tactics. Several ships spread out, taking more calculated positions, trying to corner the indomitable. Braced for another assault, Alina ordered, her voice unwavering. She had been in tight spots before, but this felt different. The Skarn were powerful, and their numbers were overwhelming. Yet, they hadn't even touched her ship yet. The Skarn opened fire again, but this time, they were more deliberate, trying to box in the human vessel. Alina saw their plan unfolding, a trap designed to force her into a position where her ship's agility would be useless. They were trying to predict her next move. She smiled grimly. They were underestimating her. "Recalculate our evasive maneuvers," Alina said, her eyes sharp. "We'll make it unpredictable." With a quick flick of the controls, she guided the indomitable into a completely different set of evasive actions, twisting the ship in directions that no one could have predicted, weaving through the barrage of energy blasts with impossible precision. The Skarn were thrown off, unable to land a single hit. For a moment, the Skarn fleet hesitated. The ship in front of them wasn't just avoiding destruction. It was outthinking them, outmaneuvering them. The Skarn had been prepared for a fight, but this was something else entirely. For the first time, they weren't sure what to expect next. "Prepare for another round of fire," Captain Therick ordered, his voice laced with frustration. "We will not let a single human ship defy us." But Alina had already made her move. The indomitable darted again, slipping away from the grasp of the Skarn, and with that, the first shock of the encounter set in. The Skarn had underestimated humanity, and now they would pay the price. The battle had entered a new phase, and the Skarn were starting to realize just how much they had underestimated the human ship. The indomitable was no longer just evading their fire. It was taking the fight to them. The Skarn, known for their ruthless and efficient military tactics, had never encountered a foe like this before. They had been expecting a quick, decisive confrontation, but the human ship had turned the tables in a way no one could have predicted. Captain Alina Drake stood at the helm, her mind sharp as she surveyed the battlefield. The Skarn fleet was regrouping, adjusting their tactics to counter the Indomitable's unpredictable maneuvers. But Alina knew their strength: the ship's speed, agility, and most importantly, its ability to adapt on the fly. It was a human trait that had served them well in countless battles, thinking outside the box when the odds seemed insurmountable. She glanced at her crew, each one poised and focused. They had trained for this. They had prepared for the impossible. And now, in the heat of battle, they were proving just how capable humans could be. "Status report, Lieutenant Simmons," Alina said, her voice calm despite the chaos unfolding outside. "We're holding steady, Captain," Simmons replied, his eyes scanning the ship's systems. "Shields are at 92%, and our engines are running at full capacity. The Skarn are adjusting their tactics, trying to predict our movements, but they're not used to this kind of unpredictability. We've got them on the defensive." Alina nodded. "Keep the pressure on them. Don't give them a moment to breathe." Outside, the Skarn fleet had shifted into a new formation, one designed to corner the Indomitable. Their ships were positioned in a wide arc, closing in slowly but steadily. It was clear that they were trying to box the human ship in, cutting off every possible escape route. The Indomitable wasn't going to let that happen. Helena activated the ship's advanced tactical systems, feeding real-time data into the battle computer. It wasn't just about avoiding enemy fire. It was about using every advantage they had. The human ship was smaller, faster, and more maneuverable than the massive Skarn warships. It could dart in and out of their lines of fire, striking when and where it was least expected. "Target the Skarn flagship," Helena ordered, her voice low but commanding. "Full power to the forward weapons." The crew responded instantly, their hands flying over the controls. The Indomitable's main cannon powered up, its core energy building to a blinding intensity. The Skarn flagship loomed large in the distance, its sleek, dark hull bristling with weapons. If they could take down the flagship, the rest of the fleet would lose their commanding presence. It would give them a critical advantage. "Firing in 3, 2, 1, fire," Helena commanded. The Indomitable's main cannon erupted with a deafening roar, sending a pulse of concentrated energy surging toward the Skarn flagship. The blast streaked through space, a brilliant flash of light cutting through the darkness. But the Skarn flagship wasn't taken off guard. Its shields flared brightly, absorbing the impact with a massive energy-shaking tremor. The flagship was damaged, but not defeated. It retaliated immediately, launching a barrage of counterfire toward the Indomitable. Helena gritted her teeth as the ship jolted with each incoming blast. "Recalculate evasive patterns. I want us out of here now." The crew worked quickly, rerouting power to the engines as the Indomitable executed a series of sharp turns, dodging the Skarn fire with precision. Helena's hands flew over the controls, guiding the ship in unpredictable directions, weaving through the debris of shattered energy blasts. The Skarn were fast, but they weren't prepared for this kind of agility. Then, with a flick of her wrist, Helena activated the ship's secondary weapon system, the ion disruptors. The Indomitable's ion cannons, hidden within the ship's sleek hull, fired off rapid pulses of energy, each one aimed at the smaller Skarn vessels that had tried to flank them. The energy pulses were designed to disrupt the Skarn's communication systems, temporarily scrambling their targeting systems. The effect was immediate. Several Skarn ships veered off course, their weapons misfiring as their targeting systems glitched. "Nice shot, Captain," Matthews said, a grin crossing his face. "We're not out of the woods yet," Helena replied, her tone sharp. "Keep the pressure on them. Don't let them regroup." The Skarn fleet, now disoriented and struggling to maintain their coordination, found themselves in disarray. They had never faced a ship that could outmaneuver them so effectively, much less one that seemed to be adapting faster than they could adjust their tactics. As the Indomitable continued to weave in and out of enemy fire, Helena knew that the tide of the battle was slowly shifting. The Skarn were still a formidable force, but they had just encountered the most dangerous enemy of all, the unpredictable nature of humanity. The battle raged on, with each move more daring than the last. The Skarn had thought they would crush the humans with ease. Now they were starting to realize that they had made a grave mistake. Helena's voice rang out across the bridge once more. "This is just the beginning. Hold your ground, crew. We're making history today." The battle outside the Indomitable had escalated into a full-fledged conflict. The Skarn fleet, their once coordinated formation now fragmented, struggled to regain control. For the first time in centuries, they were on the back foot. They had always prided themselves on their dominance in space, an invincible force that crushed any resistance. But here, in the cold void of space, a single human ship was showing them just how outmatched they were. Helena Drake's mind was razor-sharp as she monitored the ship's systems. The Indomitable was holding up, but the constant barrage from the Skarn had begun to take its toll. The shields were down to 75%, and there were reports of minor hull damage. The ship was a testament to humanity's ingenuity, but it wasn't invincible. Not yet, anyway. "We need to wrap this up soon, Captain," Commander Matthews said, his voice tight with tension. "The longer we stay in this, the more chance we give this Karn to regroup. They won't be caught off guard for much longer." Elena nodded, her jaw set in determination. "I know. We can't afford to wait them out. We need to make them understand why we're here. Get me a direct line to their flagship." Lieutenant Simmons hesitated before replying. "This Karn flagship is still in a defensive formation, Captain. It'll be difficult to establish a secure line without giving away our position. We don't have time for that." Elena replied firmly. "Do it." Simmons quickly adjusted the communication systems, and within moments, the voice of Captain Theric crackled through the comms, filled with a cold, arrogant tone. "Human Captain, you persist in this madness. Your ship will be reduced to debris before the day is out. I warn you once more, turn back or face annihilation." Elena stood tall in her command chair, staring into the cold darkness of space as she spoke. "You still don't get it, do you? You think we're here to fight you, but you're wrong. We're here to save you from something far worse than you could ever imagine. The Zorvok are coming, and when they do, no fleet, no empire will survive." There was a long pause on the other end, and Elena could almost feel this Karn captain's confusion. Finally, Theric spoke again, his voice low and dangerous. "You dare to lecture us, human. You come into our territory uninvited and expect us to listen to your nonsensical warning. There is nothing you can say that will change the inevitable." Elena's gaze hardened. "Then I guess you'll find out soon enough. But let me be clear, this isn't just about you or me. It's about the entire galaxy. We're all in this together, whether you accept it or not. You can either help us stop the Zorvok, or you can keep fighting and watch your empire burn to the ground." There was a tense silence on the comms. Elena could feel the weight of Theric's decision pressing on him. His Karn were proud, but they were not fools. They had always known how to recognize a real threat when they saw one. And Elena's words were beginning to sink in. On the bridge of the Indomitable, the crew remained silent, watching their captain as the moments stretched on. These Karn were formidable, but they had never faced an enemy that could think on the fly like humanity. Elena was giving them one last chance, one final opportunity to avoid disaster. The Ishkarn's next move would determine the course of this battle, and possibly the fate of the galaxy. After a long moment, Theric's voice returned, tinged with a mix of suspicion and reluctance. "You speak of the Zorvok as if they are already here. You expect us to believe that. You would risk everything, even your own life, to stop them." "I don't expect you to believe me," Elena said, her voice cold but steady. "But I'm not asking for your trust. I'm asking for your survival." There was a heavy pause before Theric finally responded. "You've made your point, human. But understand this, if you are lying, if this threat is some twisted ploy, we will destroy you. There will be no second chances." Elena's grip tightened on the armrest of her chair. "Then let's make sure it's a chance you don't regret." With that, she cut the comms. She could feel the tension in the air shift, the battle momentarily stalling as both sides assessed what had just happened. The Ishkarn were no longer attacking with blind fury. They were hesitating. For the first time, they were questioning their own assumptions, and that gave Elena hope. It meant that they might be ready to listen. "Captain," Matthews said, breaking the silence, "this Karn fleet is holding position. They haven't moved to engage again." "Good," Elena said, her mind already working through their next steps. "Keep the pressure on. We'll need them to stay distracted long enough to send the message." As the Indomitable hovered in the center of the chaos, Elena knew that this was the turning point. The Ishkarn had been given a choice, and whether they chose to listen or fight would determine the fate of not just the human race, but the galaxy itself. In space, where the cold void and the silence could swallow even the strongest will, Humanity was proving that they could not be so easily ignored. The Shkarn fleet remained in position, their ships now eerily still, a stark contrast to the chaotic battle that had unfolded just moments before. Alina stood at the helm of the Indomitable, her eyes scanning the sensor readings. For the first time since the conflict began, there was a brief moment of calm. The Shkarn were hesitating. They had never done that before. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. "Captain, their fleet is holding formation," Lieutenant Simmons reported, his fingers flying over his console. "It looks like they're listening, or at least considering our words." Alina didn't respond immediately. She was too focused on the next steps. She had given them a choice, a chance to ally with humanity in the face of a greater threat. But the Shkarn were an ancient race, proud and stubborn. Their hesitation wasn't a sign of surrender. It was a sign of calculation. They were weighing their options, and Alina knew that time was running out. She turned to Commander Matthews, who was watching her with a mixture of anticipation and caution. "What do you think?" Alina asked quietly, her voice carrying the weight of their mission. Matthews met her gaze, his expression serious. "I think we've given them a lot to think about. But we can't wait much longer. The Zorvok won't be waiting around for us to finish our negotiations. They're coming, and if the Shkarn don't take us seriously, we're going to be in a hell of a fight." Alina nodded, the harsh reality of the situation sinking in. She had hoped that the Shkarn would see reason, but she knew all too well how fragile alliances could be. Their decision could come at any moment, and she couldn't afford to be caught off guard. "Prepare for another round of communication," Alina said, her voice steely. "This time, I'm not going to wait for them to decide." She turned to Lieutenant Simmons. "Get me a direct line to Therak. Let's see if he's ready to hear the truth." Simmons worked quickly, his fingers moving rapidly over the interface. Within seconds, the comms opened, and the familiar voice of Captain Therak came through, still laced with suspicion, but now tinged with an underlying sense of uncertainty. "You dare to contact me again, human?" Therak's voice growled through the comms. "What more is there to discuss?" Alina's voice was unwavering, cutting through the tension. "What more is there to discuss?" "Everything, Captain. The Zorvok are not a threat that can be ignored. You've seen our power, and you've seen our technology. But the Zorvok are something beyond anything you've ever faced. We're offering you a chance to fight back, to survive. But if you choose to ignore this threat, it won't matter how powerful your fleet is. You won't be able to stop them." There was a long pause on the other end. Alina could hear the soft hum of the Indomitable systems in the background, the only sound breaking the silence. She could feel the weight of Therak's consideration. The Shkarn were proud, but they were also pragmatic. They knew that survival sometimes meant swallowing their pride. Finally, Therak's voice returned, slower, more contemplative. "You are bold, human, but your words, they carry weight. What is this Zorvok threat you speak of? If they are as dangerous as you say, why have you not been able to stop them yourselves?" Alina's gaze flickered to the stars outside the viewport. "Because we've been alone. Humanity has fought battles before, battles for survival. But the Zorvok are not just a threat to one species. They are a threat to all of us, and we can't defeat them if we're divided. That's why we need you. We need your fleet. We need your strength." Another pause. This time, it wasn't just suspicion that lingered in Therak's voice. It was doubt. Doubt that perhaps the human captain might be telling the truth, and it was a crack in their arrogance that Alina had been hoping for. "Very well," Therak said finally, his voice cold but firm. "You have given us much to think about, human. But you must understand this. If we decide to ally with you, it will not be without conditions. This Shkarn will not be subjugated. We will fight beside you, but not as your vassals, not as your subordinates. We will fight as equals, or not at all." Alina's expression softened. This was the moment she had been waiting for. "I would never ask you to be our subordinates. You are right to demand respect. All I ask is that we fight together. For our survival. For the galaxy. There was another long pause. And then, almost imperceptibly, the tension seemed to break. Therak's tone softened just slightly. We will consider your offer, but know this, if your words prove false, if this so-called Zorvok threat is a lie, we will not hesitate to destroy you. You will not leave this system alive. Elena didn't flinch. Then let's make sure we're not wasting each other's time. The comms cut off, and Elena exhaled deeply, allowing herself a brief moment of relief. They had made it past the hardest hurdle. The Skarn were considering their alliance. But the war was far from over. The Zorvok were still coming, and time was running out. Elena turned to her crew, her voice steady but resolute. Get ready. This battle is far from over. The silence that had fallen over the battlefield was deafening. The Skarn fleet was still, waiting, calculating their next move, while the Indomitable drifted in the void, its crew on edge. Elena had secured an uneasy truce, but the real test was still ahead. The Skarn had agreed to consider an alliance, but words alone wouldn't stop the Zorvok. The threat had always been real, and now the time for negotiation was rapidly running out. We don't have much time, Matthews said, his voice low as he approached Elena. The Zorvok are closer than we thought. They're already within our detection range. Elena's eyes were fixed on the view screen, where the distant stars glowed coldly. I know, she replied quietly. We need to make sure the Skarn are ready to fight. The longer we wait, the more ground the Zorvok gain. The Skarn, though calculating, had one thing in their favor. They were powerful and aggressive. But Elena knew that their strength alone wouldn't be enough to face the Zorvok. The Zorvok were brutal, calculating, and ruthless, with technology far superior to anything the Skarn or humans had ever encountered. A direct confrontation would be suicide. Captain, Lieutenant Simmons interjected, his voice urgent. I'm detecting multiple Zorvok ships entering the system. They've made the jump, and they're heading directly for us. Elena's heart raced as the display updated, showing the incoming fleet. The Zorvok ships were massive, their dark, jagged hulls glinting with ominous energy. Their weapons were already powered up, and the distance between them and the Indomitable was closing rapidly. They were here. All hands, prepare for battle. Elena's voice rang out across the ship, steady but laced with urgency. Get us in position to intercept them. I want full power to forward weapons. The crew sprang into action. The Indomitable began to accelerate, its engines roaring to life as it maneuvered into a defensive position, the shields flaring up with a blue glow to absorb the first blasts from the incoming Zorvok ships. Every crew member had been trained for moments like this, moments when survival depended on quick thinking and relentless resolve. The battle was about to begin. As the first of the Zorvok ships came into range, Elena knew there was no turning back. They had been given a choice, to fight together or face extinction. Now, that choice was being tested. Open a comm line to Therak, Elena ordered. Let's see if they're ready to keep their word. Simmons worked quickly, and soon Therak's voice echoed across the bridge, harsh and laced with tension. Human, we have come to our decision. But understand this. If we fail, we will all perish. We are not fighting only for our survival, but for the survival of the galaxy itself. We will fight, but do not think we will follow you blindly. Elena's gaze locked with Matthews for a moment before turning back to the comms. Understood, Captain. The Zorvok are already upon us. If we don't fight as one, we won't have a chance. Prepare your fleet. We take the fight to them. There was a heavy silence on the comms, and Elena could sense the Skarn captain's resolve beginning to solidify. After a moment, Therak's voice returned, grim but resolute. We will fight, human. But remember, the Skarn will never bow to you. We fight as equals, or not at all. Agreed, Elena said with finality, cutting the comms. She turned to Matthews. Time to show the galaxy what humanity is made of. The battle erupted in full force. The Zorvok ships unleashed a devastating barrage, their energy weapons slamming into the shields of the Indomitable and the Iskarn vessels. The space between them crackled with energy as the two fleets collided with the Zorvok, who showed no mercy. Their weapons were faster, more precise, and their tactics were ruthless. The Zorvok had one singular goal: complete destruction. The Indomitable danced through the chaos, its engines screaming as it weaved through incoming fire. Alina pushed the ship to its limits, her hands flying over the controls as she guided it around the destructive energy blasts that lit up the space around them. Every movement, every decision, was a matter of life or death. The Iskarn ships, for their part, fought with relentless aggression, their own weapons lighting up as they targeted the Zorvok ships. Despite their technological advantage, the Zorvok were being met with resistance that they hadn't anticipated. The Iskarn's fire was focused, calculated, coordinated, something the Zorvok hadn't expected from their former enemies. "We're holding them off," Matthews called out as the Indomitable continued to dodge and weave, keeping the Zorvok on the defensive. "But they're too strong. We can't keep this up forever." Alina's eyes narrowed as she focused on the battlefield. "Then we need to take the fight to them. We have to hit them where it hurts." She glanced at her crew, their faces tense with the weight of the moment. "Prepare the secondary weapon systems. It's time to show the Zorvok that humanity won't go down without a fight." The Indomitable fired again, this time with a calculated precision that sent shockwaves through the Zorvok fleet. The tide of the battle was turning. The question now wasn't if they could win, it was how much they would have to sacrifice to ensure they did. The battlefield was a maelstrom of energy and destruction, the void of space filled with the flash of weapons and the roar of engines. The Indomitable and the Iskarn fleet were locked in a desperate struggle against the Zorvok, their alliance forged under the pressure of survival. Alina Drake stood at the helm, her eyes darting across the battlefield, calculating their next move with cold precision. "We've inflicted some damage, but it's not enough," Matthews said through gritted teeth, his hands gripping the edge of the tactical console. "The Zorvok ships are too advanced. We can't keep up at this rate." Alina didn't respond immediately. She could feel the weight of every decision pressing down on her shoulders. Every move, every tactic, every second counted. They were facing an enemy that had no mercy, no hesitation. The Zorvok weren't just fighting for victory. They were fighting for total annihilation. "Captain, the Iskarn flagship is reporting critical damage," Lieutenant Simmons reported, his voice tense. "They've sustained heavy fire from the Zorvok's front line, and their shields are failing. They won't be able to hold much longer." Alina's gaze snapped to the display, where the Iskarn flagship, once a towering presence on the battlefield, was now battered, its hull scorched and burning. The Zorvok were relentless. "We need to act now," Alina said, her voice steady despite the storm raging around them. "If the Iskarn fall, the entire fleet will collapse. We can't afford that." She turned to Matthews. "Initiate the secondary strike plan. Full power to the weapons and reroute energy to the shields. We're going in." Matthews hesitated for a moment, clearly understanding the risk. "Captain, if we engage that close, we'll be vulnerable. The Zorvok won't give us a chance to retreat." "I'm aware of the risk," Alina said, her tone unwavering. "But we don't have the luxury of playing it safe. We either push them back now, or we lose everything." The crew worked quickly, rerouting power, preparing the ship's most powerful weapons for one final, all-or-nothing strike. The Indomitable moved into position, its hull vibrating with the power coursing through it. Alina took a deep breath, her fingers hovering over the command interface. Fire. The Indomitable's main cannon erupted in a blinding flash of light, sending a devastating surge of energy into the heart of the Zorvok flagship. The blast tore through the enemy's defenses, shattering the shields and slamming into the core of their vessel. The explosion that followed was deafening, sending a shockwave across the battlefield. The Zorvok flagship buckled, its once pristine form crumbling as the energy from the blast consumed it. But Alina knew that this wasn't over. The Zorvok fleet was still intact, and their retaliatory fire came fast and furious, focused on the Indomitable and the remaining Skarn ships. The battle was a blur of light and sound as the Indomitable dodged and weaved through the chaos, its engines roaring as it danced between blasts. "Shields at 40%, Captain," Simmons called out, his voice strained. "Hull integrity is failing. We can't keep this up for much longer." Alina's grip tightened on the control panel, her mind racing. The Indomitable was a marvel of human ingenuity, but it wasn't invincible. They needed to end this, and quickly. "Matthews, take us in closer," she ordered. "We need to finish this. Now." Matthews didn't hesitate. He turned the ship hard to the left, darting toward the heart of the Zorvok formation, where their heaviest ships had congregated. The Zorvok responded instantly, their weapons locking onto the human ship in a deadly embrace. The Indomitable fired again, its secondary weapon systems lighting up the space around them. A series of explosions rocked the Zorvok fleet as the Indomitable unleashed a barrage of ion disruptors, scrambling the Zorvok ship's targeting systems and sending them into disarray. The Skarn, seeing the opportunity, rallied their forces and followed suit, launching a devastating counterattack that struck deep into the Zorvok lines. The tide of battle was shifting. The Zorvok were still powerful, but they were beginning to falter. The Skarn, inspired by the human resolve, fought with renewed fury, their weapons blasting through the Zorvok ships with brutal precision. The Zorvok, once so sure of their dominance, were now caught in a battle they had never expected. Alina's voice rang out across the bridge. "We can win this. We push through, we hit them hard, and we don't stop until they break." The crew's resolve hardened as they followed their captain's orders. Every shot, every maneuver was calculated to cripple the Zorvok. The Indomitable was pushing its systems beyond their limits, but Alina knew that this was their final chance. If they didn't break the Zorvok now, they would never get another opportunity. The Zorvok flagship, already damaged, began to retreat, its remaining ships following suit. The remaining Zorvok forces, battered and disorganized, could no longer maintain their assault. The Zorvok were breaking. "We did it," Matthews said, awe in his voice. Alina didn't answer immediately. She stood there, staring at the fragmented Zorvok fleet as it limped away, retreating into the depths of space. The battle was won, but the cost had been great. The Indomitable was barely operational, and the Skarn ships were in no better shape. But they had done it. Together, humans and Skarn had faced the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known, and had emerged victorious. "We've shown them," Alina said, her voice barely a whisper. "We've shown them what humanity is capable of."